Well, the deal is finalized. Six-time Super Bowl winning coach Bill Belichick will be the next head coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels. Joining me now is Inside Carolina reporter Taylor Vippolis. Now, Taylor, the first question that everyone wants to know is, how did this hire come to be?
Yeah, a lot of people I don't think were too when Bill Belichick's name first got thrown out for this job, a lot of people were like, "Oh, he's just kind of putting his name out here to try to get back into the NFL." But from talking to people at Carolina, they were surprised at how prepared he came into the meeting and how serious he was taking it. And that surprisingly, he can turn on the charm. The Bill Belichick you see in the press conference isn't the Bill Belichick you get when you're interviewing. And he was a lot more connected to the college game than you would think with Jed Fish and his son being at Washington. And a lot of Bill Belichick's motivations for taking this Carolina job was the fact that he wants to honor his father's legacy. His dad was an assistant coach for Carolina back in 53 to 55, and he views Carolina in high regard because of his father.
The Tar Heels are going from a 73-year-old coach in Mac Brown to a 72-year-old coach in Bill Belichick. What's been the initial reaction from the fans and people close to the program who may have felt that Brown was a little bit out of touch due to his age?
Yeah, I was told by Carolina that when they were moving on from Mac Brown, one of their goals in this hire was to get younger. Bill Belichick's 72, so I guess you could check that box off in accomplishing that goal. But I think the from fans, I think there's a difference between Mac Brown 73 and Bill Belichick 72, just when you hear them talking about the game. Like you watch Bill Belichick on the Manning cast, and just his attention to detail and his focus on the X's and O's for football is something that you weren't really getting with Mac Brown. Mac Brown kind of came in with this reputation of the salesman and was great at recruiting, but left a lot to be desired when it came to on the field and the performances on Saturday. I don't really think that's necessarily a worry for this Bill Belichick era in Chapel Hill, and a lot of that's going to depend on the staff he brings in. But when you talk about football minds in football, it really doesn't get better than somebody like Bill Belichick.
Well, that leads to a great question. What does a potential staff look like with Bill Belichick? Obviously, there's a lot of speculation that his son Steve, like you mentioned, currently the defensive coordinator at the University of Washington, will join him as a potential head coach in waiting. But in addition to his son potentially joining his staff, what does a Bill Belichick staff in North Carolina in 2025 potentially look like?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of the familiar names and a lot of the names that end with Belichick. You would assume Steve Belichick, Washington's DC, makes the move over with his dad. Brian Belichick is coaching safeties in New England right now. And then I think a lot of the staff is going to be a lot of familiar names, whether it's McDaniels, Josh McDaniels, brother in Houston, Ben McDaniels, who's their wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator. That's a name that has kind of been linked in a potential staff. It's going to be interesting to see. Normally, when you go from one coaching staff to the next, there's some kind of holdover in those staffs. If there was going to be a holdover from Mac Brown staff, it's most likely going to be Freddie Kitchens, who has a lot of NFL experience. But I think the staff and who's going to be on it is still a pretty big work in progress.
We're in an NIL era. We're in an era where the transfer portal does a lot of the heavy lifting. But let's look at it from a traditional recruiting trail. What does high school recruiting look like under Bill Belichick?
It's going to be interesting to see because you see the Colorado method with Deion Sanders, and you would assume that North Carolina is going to take a similar approach to that, where they're going to rely more on the transfer portal and building a team year to year instead of going heavily on recruiting. I think that's been kind of the one critique that a lot of people have is how will Bill Belichick do recruiting at the high school level. If North Carolina can kind of build this NIL program under Bill Belichick and kind of have him be the face of the program, there might not be too big a need for high school recruiting, but that's still to be determined.
Well, the deal's finalized, but over the next few days and weeks, what kind of changes should we expect to see as the program turns over to the Belichick regime?
It's going to be interesting. I think he's got his work cut out. This was a deal that Carolina was kind of hoping to get wrapped up a lot sooner than it did with the transfer portal opening up on the 9th, and now Carolina's kind of a little behind the curve. But again, with the transfer portal, and you see in Colorado, you do have the potential to kind of rebuild a team and turn them into contenders overnight. And with Bill Belichick at the helm, Carolina should be in a pretty good spot when somebody like that with all his Super Bowl rings comes into your living room.
All right, well, there you have it, folks. Bill Belichick, the six-time Super Bowl winning coach with the New England Patriots, finalizes a deal with the North Carolina Tar Heels. Taylor, thanks for joining us. For more information on the Belichick to North Carolina hire, you can go to InsideCarolina.com. They've been all over this story. Broke the news on Wednesday that Bill Belichick has agreed to a deal to be the head coach of North Carolina. InsideCarolina.com will have all your Carolina coverage in the weeks and days to come.